First things first, thank you for this honor. I'm really delighted to be guiding you here. I want to explain to you how the Jewish people came to meet this mountain. As you'll notice throughout the day, whenever I talk about Temple Mount, it's always going up to Temple Mount, meaning this is both a geographical, topographical and a spiritual action. Let's begin our story with a nation of freed slaves that leaves Egypt in the late Bronze era. Okay, we're talking about roughly the 16th century BC. And they walk through the desert. Takes them roughly 40 years to cross the desert until they reach the homeland which their folklore speaks of. And they cross the River Jordan at a place called Qasr al-Yahud. The Arabs of Jericho till this day call it Qasr al-Yahud. They enter via Jericho. It takes them roughly 15 years to settle the land. These are 12 tribes. For the first 150 years or so, they govern themselves by a series of judges, which are usually an internal tribe appointee. So you don't have one localized government at this time yet. About 150 years pass, and the Hebrews come to the decision that a central government under a king, a monarchy, will potentially do our nation much better in the process of nation building. So, the first king, King Saul, is anointed, and his kingdom is centered up north. Okay? His successor, King David, and it was somewhat of a traumatic exchange of government there. He breaks away from the northern kingdom of Saul, which is up in the north. A new king, new kingdom, needs a new capital. And King David takes the city of Jerusalem, which is about 150, 200 meters that way, downhill. Now, every big city in the world, the city always starts from a very specific point, and that point is water. Okay? Specifically in the ancient world, obviously we're going to want to live next to water. So that is why the city starts down below. That's where the water is, okay? The Gihon spring. And that is the original first starting point of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, which is unique in many different ways, is also unique in the fact that its ancient city and its old city are in two different places. Okay? The ancient city of Jerusalem is now outside the walls of old Jerusalem. Modern Jerusalem obviously encompasses all of them. Okay? But my point is this. When King David originally settles in the city of Jerusalem, which is down below, he has now established a new human condition, one of a city. So you have humans ruling down below, but he looks up, and what does he see? This mountain. Now, if you're going to rule below over man, you need a blessing from up above. And in this case, the topography literally dictates the theology. Okay? Where is the Lord? Up. Okay? We all pray looking upwards. We all regard the God as being above us. So, if King David is down below, this is our mountain. Here. And Jerusalem, King David, will now start to build from here. In order to sanctify his city, he needs to rule by the grace of God from above. Man below, God above. So after he conquers the city, he walks up the mountain, and there's a farmland on top of the mountain. It belongs to a person called Arvana the Jebusite. And Arvana comes out to King David, who has just conquered a city, and he bows before him, Your Majesty, and he says, I am offering you this field as a gift. And King David says, no. If I want this to be a place of worship, I cannot accept it as a gift. I have to buy it. Okay? Because only if you give me a certificate saying that I have legally bought this, only then can I build some form of religious apparatus on it. I don't want anyone to ever be able to point a finger and say, you took it by force, or you took it by wrongfully. So it has to be kosher, to use the relevant word. But David, so rather than build a temple, he builds a small altar. His son, King Solomon, who will be a great diplomat and a very learned man, a very wise man, he will be tasked with building the first temple. In the days of Solomon, there are 3 buildings on the mountain. Let's say our mountain at this point will look as such, and there are 3 buildings on the mountain. Okay, first of all, obviously in the middle, there will be the temple. The second building will be the warehouse where we stored the wood. The Bible tells the exact amounts of wood purchased from Lebanon and from Turkey, with the exact specification that they were to serve in the temple. Okay, this wood is meant for building the temple. So it is shipped from Lebanon, from Tyre, and stored on the mountain. The third building, and it is one of the most interesting points of our history, this is the palace of Pharaoh's daughter. This is the only instance where Pharaoh married his daughter out. Okay, so this tells us that Solomon was potentially a very big and truly important king in the regional arena. As far as the Lord is concerned, he gets to build the temple. The first temple built by King Solomon, mostly wood, and we now have sovereignty. You now have a kingdom with a central place of worship, central government and central religion. Time goes by and a king decides to stop paying tribute to the regional empire, which is Assyria. The Assyrians essentially swarm the Middle East, destroying everyone who rebelled against them. As I said, there are 12 tribes within the Hebrew nation at this point. The Assyrians storm the north, and everything north of Jerusalem is lost. That's what we call the lost 10 tribes. Nothing survives the Assyrian assimilation machine. They conquer you, pack your bags, you're moving tomorrow. Okay? Where are you moving to? Canada. Wherever. The point is, you're going and you're never coming back. So that is the end of the 12 tribes of Israel. 10 have disappeared. When the Assyrian army reaches Jerusalem, they are stopped by a plague. A plague is upon them, and the only tribe that survives is the tribe of Judea, which is the tribe that resides in Jerusalem. Judea and a little bit of the tribe of Benjamin. And the Assyrians go back their way. Time goes on. The Assyrians are replaced by the Babylonian Empire. And as we said, the Assyrians did not destroy the temple. A plague stopped them from entering Jerusalem. But again, the Hebrews stopped paying tribute to the regional client, and the Babylonian army storms this region. They destroy the temple, and the people are exiled. If you know the song, "By the Rivers of Babylon, where we sat down and we remembered Zion." The entire royalty, the administration levels, anyone of any sort of importance is exiled to Babylon. However, the Babylon exile only lasts 70 years. And they also came back with women, which they married in Babylon. And apparently they were treated with some respect there. Okay, so this is not as tragic as the Assyrian conquest. However, the Babylonians did destroy the temple, the first temple, Solomon's temple. If you'll remember your history, the Babylonian Empire is now replaced by the Persian Empire. And the Persian king, Koresh, releases the Koresh Declaration on 538 BC, saying all the subjugated nations, including the Jews, are free to return to their ancestral homelands and rebuild their temples. So again, another exodus. The Jews are now moving from Babylon back to Canaan. Jews arrive in Canaan, rebuild their temple. Now I want to try and show you something. You see that? What I'm pointing at, Kirill?
Yeah.
Okay, you see that stone underneath it?
Okay.
Take these binoculars and tell me if you can read what it says on that stone. Get a little bit closer so you get a good angle. There's a piece of graffiti there.
Shalom.
Can you see the words?
Yeah.
Right, he can see the words, bad angle, so he can't actually read it. This is a piece of graffiti from the 6th century BC. And it says in Hebrew, וראיתם וסס לבבכם ותצמחנה עצמותיכם כדשא. And you shall see, and you shall rejoice, and your bones shall flourish like weeds. It's from the book of Isaiah, and it means when we see something good, something we thought was already dead, but it is now rising and flourishing. The point is, when the Jews return from Babylon, they remember that there used to be a temple here, and it's in ruins now, okay? But now, we're going to make it flourish again. So, that tells us two things. A, the exiles who returned from Babylon to Canaan wrote Hebrew. Okay, it was already a language that unified this people. That piece of graffiti right there is potentially from the year 570 BC, and I can read it. Okay, it's the exact same letters. I have no problem reading it. Time goes on. As we said, we already have a new temple. This is the second temple which the Jews have built upon returning from Babylon. After the Babylonian Empire, after the Babylon that we said are replaced by the Persians are replaced by the, come on guys, little bit of history. Persians are replaced by the Greeks. The Greek Empire. Everyone passes through here. This is the junction. Everyone passes through Canaan. The Greeks allow a Jewish dynasty, a monarch, to rule over the land in their name. Okay, he's a client king. This is the Hasmonean dynasty. The Hasmonean dynasty continues to develop the temple. The Greeks, in time, are followed by the Romans, of course. And this is where our story quickens. Okay, the Romans appoint Herod, a pagan king, to be their client king in this land. It is now called the land of Judea, because over the tribe of Judea who resides here. And their king is Herod. And Herod, if you pardon my French, he's somewhat of a megalomaniac. And he says, you want to have a temple? This little thing, this won't cut it. This is just not impressive enough. And Herod goes to work. So like we said, a mountain looks like this. However, take a look behind you. Let's look at this wall. We're essentially looking at a box, aren't we? Like a proper wall. Where's the mountain? The answer is simple. Herod builds a series of arches. On the arches, he places a floor. On the floor, he builds another series of arches. On the arches, he builds another series of arches until the mountain is level. This is the way Herod essentially swallowed the mountain, and the result is what you see behind you. The topography has not changed since Herodian or Roman times. The mountain is inside this wall, and the entire creation, what we know as Temple Mount today in the 21st century, is a Herodian creation. Okay? Roughly 1st century BC. As I said, Herod is a pagan king. He converts to Judaism and he marries a Hasmonean Jewish princess in order to better his condition amongst the Jews, but the Jews are not quick to accept him. He rules on behalf of Rome, and the Jews rebel against Rome. Historically, that's a bad idea. The result is, and this is why I wanted to bring you specifically to this place. Let's take a few steps forward and understand the price of rebelling against Rome. The Roman army ascends on Jerusalem, Aspasianus and his son Titus. And what we're looking at here, I want you to see these stones right here. These are all stones that the Romans pushed from up there. Okay? So for us, the term Churban, destruction, the term destruction is a very important term in Jewish history because it refers to the destruction of the temple, the physical destruction of the temple, which is at the same time the destruction of Jewish sovereignty. Once we no longer have a temple, we do not have the ability to worship our God. What you see here, it is all the remains, the ruins of temple stones which were pushed from up there and landed down below. You can actually see where it breaks the street. So again, when we're talking about destruction, we're talking about something very, very concrete. These are Roman soldiers simply pushing the walls down. The Romans leave the mountain in ruin. The Romans destroy Jerusalem as we know it, and they replace it with a pagan city called Ilia Capitolina, a city dedicated to the Capitoline gods, the Roman gods. The people are mostly banished. The Roman soldiers are settled in the new city, and it's now a pagan Roman city. Any Jewish memory is erased violently. Time goes by, the Roman Empire turns into the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Constantine, if we have time, we can gladly talk about his mother Helena, who was essentially walking around these parts and found the true cross of Christ. And Christianity was born some 400 meters that way. Okay? But we're still in the Jewish period here. Okay? And as we said, after the Romans, Emperor Constantine converts to Christianity. The Roman Empire is now the Christian Empire, or as we call it, the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines, which are Christians, make a specific point of leaving the Temple Mount in ruins. Why? Jesus Christ predicted that not one stone will left standing in Jerusalem. Because the Jews have sinned against God, then the temple will be destroyed, Jerusalem will be destroyed, and not one stone will be left standing in Jerusalem. That is Jesus' prophecy. So once Christianity is ruling over the area, they leave it as a ruin in order to prove the prophecy. And the center of gravity of Jerusalem moves, as we said, 400 meters that way to what is now the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus Christ was buried. So we have now entered the Christian era of Jerusalem. Time goes by, and in the 6th century, the prophet is born in the desert to the south of us. By 1631, Omar ibn al-Khattab arrives in Jerusalem. He conquers the city from the Byzantine Empire. They surrender peacefully. The Bishop of Jerusalem, Suprenius, invites Omar ibn al-Khattab to pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And Omar says, if I pray here now, it will become a Muslim place of worship. So it's better for you that I do not pray here. He goes outside and prays across the street, and that is now where the Mosque of Omar stands. What he does do, he takes the key from the Bishop Suprenius, and he gives it to a prominent family in the city. And that family, until this day, the El Husseini family, they still hold the key. The door to the holiest place to Christianity opens each morning and closes each night according to the Muslim landlord. That's the declaration here. And the key has been passed down in his family for 1300 years. Okay? So that's a task that family still fulfills in Jerusalem today. By the way, the Al-Husseini family, very prominent Palestinian family. So as we said, we are now entering the Muslim period, the Umayyads. Now, if we look on the wall, you see the big stones on the bottom, and they all have a sort of square passepartout on them, if you can notice. These are Herodian stones. That's how we recognize a Herodian stone, that sort of passepartout around it. But if you go up, you'll see that there are some much smaller stones on the upper part. Okay? These are the Umayyad additions. Up until this time, the wall was lower. As we said, the Romans pushed lots of it down, as we can see, and the Umayyads raised it back up. So we're looking at Roman times up until the year 70 AD, which is the destruction, and anything above that is Umayyad. The Umayyads also built, as I pointed out earlier, the Umayyad palaces, which are to our south. And the Umayyads tried to build a sort of regional governance center here. But the archaeology tells us that it did not come to be. Okay, there were never active officers. There was never an active palace. After the Umayyads come the Fatimites, and after the Fatimites come the Abbasites. And after the Abbasites, we have now reached the 12th century, the First Crusade. In the year 1099, the crusade out of Europe via Antioch reaches Jerusalem and establishes the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Kingdom of Jerusalem will last until the year 1187. The Crusader presence in the Holy Land will last until 1187. Jerusalem will fall before that. Jerusalem is conquered from Christianity by Saladin al-Ayyubi, and now begins the Ayyubite period of Jerusalem. After the Ayyubites, essentially we are now entering some 730 years of Muslim rule, which ended only after World War I. Okay, so we have, like I said, we have the Ayyubites, Saladin al-Ayyub, followed by the Mamluks, who are Egyptian. The Mamluks themselves are usually children sold from the Balkan area, sold into slavery. But the actual government that uses them is the Egyptian government. So we have the Mamluk period in Jerusalem, very significant period. We have lots of Mamluk visual around us. After the Mamluks, the Ottoman Empire comes into being. That lasts until World War I. And following World War I, the British briefly rule over Jerusalem until the year 1948. In the year 1948, the country of Israel is recreated and war breaks out. Jordan invades, and this part of the city, East Jerusalem, is conquered by Jordan. So Jerusalem is divided in the year 1948 between Israel and Jordan. The walls around Jerusalem, we stood at the foot of that wall. Okay? The wall surrounds the entire city. The wall is a much, much later addition. It was erected by Solomon the Magnificent during the Ottoman Empire, so we're talking roughly between the 14th and the 16th century. Okay, a work in process. So hopefully you now understand how our little mountain came to look like a box. In the middle of the mountain, again, I want you to imagine it as a slope going up that way. In the middle of the mountain, there is a stone. That stone, we, the Jews, call it the foundation stone. This is the stone from which God took dirt, breathed life into it, and created the world. So that was the stone upon which was the center of the temple. However, the stone is believed to be sacred according to tradition, not only history, but according to tradition, it is supposed to have been sanctified way before. This is Mount Moriah. This is where the Lord told Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. This is Mount Moriah. This is where supposedly Noah's ark stopped after the flood. Noah had with him the bones of the first man. The flood stops, Noah comes off of the ark, and he buries the skull of the first man on Mount Moriah, place from where Muhammad ascended to the heavens. It was on the year, I think, 691, when Muhammad rode his winged horse, Al-Buraq, to the furthest mosque. The Quran says Al-Aqsa, the furthest mosque. It doesn't specify where, but the hadith say that the furthest mosque was in Jerusalem. Muhammad rode his winged horse to Jerusalem, upon which, from the rock of what we call the rock of foundation, he ascended to the heavens. Okay? Muslim belief has it that on the rock you can see the Prophet's footprint from where he rose to the heaven. The legend says that when Muhammad rose to the heavens, the rock wanted to rise with him, and the angels had to pull the rock down. So there's a mark on the rock where the Prophet stood. The Prophet rises to the heaven, where he receives the commandments of Islam. He receives the new Qibla to pray to Mecca, to south. Up until that point in time, the Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the original Qibla. One of the mosques on the mountain is called the Qibli Mosque. So that is why it is sanctified to Islam. We've already discussed why it's sanctified to Judaism, okay? And if it's sanctified to Judaism, it is automatically sanctified to Christianity as well, okay? So we have now decreed that the mountain is sacred to all three religions.